Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unchained. I'm your host, Travis Walker, and it has been a pleasure to be with each and every one of you as we have gone through 7 nights already. Tonight is night number 8 in our series, and it's still not too late to register. We would love to get to know you if you are following along with us and you haven't done so already. Maybe you've been watching on YouTube or on Facebook, and maybe you've been watching the recorded episodes and now you're here live. Please take the time to register with us, relevantseminars.com/Fort Myers. We would love to stay in touch with you. We'd love to connect with you. And there's still a couple nights left to have your name thrown in the drawing for a book. I finally brought it today. It is The Darkness Shall Not Overcome. It's a signed copy by Pastor Richie Halverson, who has been with us each and every night sharing a wonderful message about hope and healing, recovering from addiction. And tonight we have a special treat. We have my friend Mike, who is joining us from Arkansas. So we are going to be connecting with him via Zoom. So let's get right into our interview with him at this time. All right. Well, I'm so excited to be here with my friend Mike. How are you doing today?
Doing good.
It's so good to see you, man, because, we go back quite a few years. I can remember back in Arkansas, I was doing this Revelation class. I think it was in a
Hmm.
hotel or something. And
I was at the aquatic center, the basketball courts and all that in Bryant, Benton Bryant, the rec center. Hmm.
that's right. Yeah, I couldn't remember where we were doing it at.
Hmm. Hmm.
And and so Mike came up after one of my presentations
Yeah,
and started engaging me, and then pretty much we figured out we were like living in the same neighborhood. And
yeah,
I don't know, from then on we just started to hang out more and more. And it
yeah,
was good times, man. Good times back, like I think that was like 2009 to 2012, in that time range, somewhere in there.
yeah. And it's not a widely successful tactic, but you guys were sending out flyers, letting everybody know about the. I'm going to call it a revival. It was definitely a speaker series, and that's how I'd heard about it. And I was single at the time and had no kids, and I've just always been interested in end times theology, and yeah, I ended up there, and then yeah, here we are, man, years, more than a decade for sure later.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how time flies. And so yeah, man, I mean, I'd love to let everybody else get a little better acquainted with you as well. So, kind of tell everybody where you're from, where you grew up, how you
Hmm.
ended up in Arkansas, and just a little bit
Yeah,
about what you're doing now, maybe.
yeah, sure. So I'm a military brat. So I grew up, was born in Florida. Months later, moved to Japan. 3 years later, moved to Denver, Colorado. 3 years after that, I moved to Alabama. We stayed there for 8 years, but we did move once while in Alabama. Went to private schools in Alabama, three different private schools in Alabama. Then I moved to um, Maryland, and I did 3 years in high school, public schools in Maryland. And then after that, my dad retired. He was a Air Force lieutenant colonel. So he retired to Springfield, Tennessee, which is a town just south of where his family all live. And so I did my senior year in Springfield High School Public Schools. Within 6 or 8 months ago, I guess, after graduating, I joined the military. And actually, how I ended up in Arkansas, if it all comes back to I peed in the woods in Alaska. Not kidding. I was in the military myself. I was in the Air Force. I had orders uh, to leave Japan after 2 years. I had a 2 year assignment there, and I had orders to leave for Mountain Home, um, Iowa, not Arkansas. and um, I was in Alaska, and some friends and I had gone out drinking, and we were out in the middle of the woods. But in Alaska, it's light, year round, and well, not year round. I'm sorry, all day long, certain times of the year. And I had to go to the bathroom. Some police pull us over. The individual who was driving the car was only 20 years old, and someone had snuck him a single beer, and he was our designated driver, but somebody had snuck him a single beer while we were at the bar. So he ends up getting a DUI, even though he was only at a .02, but because he was underage, he still got a DUI. I didn't get any trouble from the police officer, but then when we got back to, uh, I guess our chief officer, he ultimately blamed me for uh, this designated driver who had a beer and was underage, and held me back and kept me in. At the end of the day, I got in trouble for it, and he made me stay in Japan. And then staying in Japan, I met an individual who brought me to Arkansas. So very long story, but that ultimately, and I've thought about that a lot in sobriety. Is like, man, how did I actually get here in Arkansas? How did this all happen? And so it's actually just a recent revelation that it all came back to a TDY trip to Alaska, and it's odd, but I definitely I'm now I've lived in Arkansas for I'm gonna say 14 years, maybe 15 years. I've become a home builder, and I met my wife 10 years ago. We have two children now, 2 and 5, and I love my job. There's no doubt about it. I love what I do. I love the neighborhood that I'm doing it in. I am still in love with my wife. We are happily married, and I feel like in a lot of ways getting even more happy, more and more happy to be with each other. And just really kind of nerding out on being a dad, being a good dad now. So it's interesting, but at the end of the day, yeah, it's just crazy to me. How did I get here? I have no family here. My family is in Springfield, Tennessee, uh, Adairsville, Kentucky, and yet I'm down here all alone and really doing some, relatively big things in a small pond.
Yeah, no, I totally remember that. I remember when we first met, you were transitioning from like being a landlord to basically dipping your foot in the home builder realm.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
specifically remember the first house you built, and then you built
Hmm.
another one, and it was starting to take off right when I left. I can remember that. And yeah, it's sounds like a an interesting story that I would love to unpack more on that side of things, what God has been, inspiring you to do in the city. And maybe we can get to that at the end. But this whole seminar is about being unchained. And so you mentioned alcohol was a part of your life, clearly when you were in the military. And
Hmm.
uh and so, how describe your relationship with alcohol, or if there was any other similar types of drugs maybe that you did during that time, or maybe how that progressed to the point
Hmm.
where you recognized there was a problem.
Sure. I started drinking alcohol at 14 while I was in Maryland, and I wasn't like a heavy user, but I was a frequent user. I remember telling my parents that I didn't get off of work until an hour after I actually did, and I would drink these disgusting St. Ives malt liquor beers. And I would get like this 32-ounce version of them, and I would only drink half of it, and then I would go home and sleep, and then the next night I would work, and then I would drink the other half. And it was just so, and like it was disgusting fresh. It was disgusting a day later, all shook up behind my truck seat. But that just kind of grew. The military lifestyle, drinking is just a heavy part. of the lifestyle. Then going to college for basically 4 years. It's a big part of the lifestyle. And then post college, it's interesting. It starts to because what was a probably every Friday and Saturday night thing for years, unless there's some reason why you just can't that weekend. And as grow into an adult, get a real job, etc., turns into a 3 night thing, and then it turns into a 4 night thing. And that's where I really kind of held my ground for years. I've always been interested in fitness and taking care of my body, eating well. And so kind of been disciplined in that regard and kind of kept myself in check for a very long time. And it wasn't until we had our first child that we're sleep deprived. We've paid for sleep training, and we're getting up multiple times a night, and we finally got him sleeping mostly through the night, but somebody has to sleep with him. But meanwhile, my wife was pregnant with our daughter at the time, and I remember like just thinking I was playing the hero's part for sleeping with our toddler through the night. But I'm a very light sleeper. So I thought at the time. I think it was, I really kind of think back, and I didn't realize it. I honestly thought I was a light sleeper. And that, in order for me to get into deep sleep, that I had to use alcohol. And so I'm a Kentucky boy. Whiskey drinking is heavy in my family. My grandfather did it. My great grandfather did it. My dad did it. We all love bourbon whiskey. And so it was just really easy for me to treat bourbon whiskey as a sleep aid. And that's, so I did there was about 7 months that I had surrendered to using whiskey as a sleep aid. And it was a stressful time work wise. So I didn't fight it a whole lot. I was able to, fall asleep, get my toddler to sleep through the night, etc. And it wasn't until 7 months later we get Bowden in the bed, sleeping on his own through the night. I'm out of the bed, and I'm like, okay, I need to reel this back in. I know this is unhealthy. It's not sustainable. And so I remember, trying to take a night off, for the first time in 7 months, basically, and getting in the bed and falling asleep. And 15 minutes later, my eyes popping back open, and they're just like, I want a treat, basically. No, you're not going to sleep. I want a treat. And I was like, oh man, no. So, meanwhile, Isla has come along. So we've got this new daughter, and I suppose I had kind of just surrendered to it for a little while longer. Just like, oh man, I know that reckoning day is coming. I'm going to have to deal with this later. But I don't know. I definitely remember waking up every morning like, all right, was last night the last night? Was it the last night? Just hearing that not audible voice in our spirit, just asking us, asking me every morning in prayer and meditation and practicing mindfulness. Like, was that it? Was that the last night, Mike? And then
Right.
every night.
Let me just jump in.
Every night. Yeah.
You're a believer. I mean, when we met, you were a believer. You're pretty involved in your church. You were helping out with their basketball ministry, and I mean, I know you've been a man of faith. So this isn't like you just doing all this, away, like it's a rebellion against God. And yet, what I hear you say
right.
is that in the midst of your relationship with God, he's starting to, like, the voice is starting to get louder, or like there's more of a conviction coming from him to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really easy to make excuses for it. And I'm still so getting to the end of the story, and then we'll come back. But I'm only 120, 130 days sober. Like, I'm still an infant in my sobriety. I'm still this is the longest I have gone without drinking since before I was 14 years old. Like I'm just now really experiencing life in weekends and going to the beach and going on vacation sober for the very first time in my life, and not. Uh, I mean, I just wasn't the type that just got all the time got plowed, but I just used alcohol for a lot of different situations in my life, and um, but so I'm using every night as a sleep aid and recognizing that I've become dependent on it. I can see throughout history that at the end of the day, like we used alcohol is was not uncommon for children to drink in their for breakfast. In places where they didn't have access to good water, they would give their children a hard cider. It was a low grade alcohol, but it was at least it was fermented. It was safe for them to consume. Um, it's just been a part of the human experience in some capacity, and I suppose I was kind of using that as an excuse, like, well, I guess this is just going to be my human experience, and that I'm, dependent, and I didn't necessarily dislike it. It wasn't negatively impacting my life. I wasn't my very best self, obviously, but I was still able to get up. I would run 5 miles. During COVID, I was running 5 miles, 4 to 6 mornings a week with my son, and then later my son and my daughter. I would push them, and we'd run 5 miles first thing in the morning. Like I say, four to five mornings every week, and that no matter how hot it was, I didn't care. And then I would spend all day hydrating, pumping my body full of good food, nutrition, and then at the end of the day, just destroy my body with whiskey and red wine. But this went on for several years. I finally made it to a point where I just really wanted to get off. I was just feeling it in my spirit that I was just ready to get off. I was ready to not be dependent on it. Well, in Arkansas, medicinal cannabis is legal now, and it's the gummies, the CBD, the THC, all the sleep gummies, they're all edibles. That stuff is just so like this is a life changing. This is a life hack. Uh, this blah blah blah, just all the things that we're hearing about these sleep gummies. I'm like, oh yeah, all right, cool, let's try this. Well, and sure enough, I mean, they did. I was able. It gave me control back over alcohol. I was able to, use cannabis in different forms and not consume alcohol. And I appreciated having the control back over alcohol. And I remember, sharing with several friends, like just like being so thankful and thanking God, like, thank you for cannabis. Thank you, Lord God. Like you have, given me this tool and made me less dependent on alcohol and given me power over alcohol. Now I can drink when I want to drink. And that went on for a little over a year. And then um, I was going through a stressful period in my life. Everything is really going my way in kind of really every way that you could imagine. I had a good, relatively healthy marriage. I was a good, relatively good dad. I was a good boss. I was being very productive. I was, fit ish for a 40-year-old that drank every night. I mean, I was. No one could have told me that, Mike, you have a problem,
Mhm.
and I would have been like, dude, you. How about you wake up tomorrow morning at 5 and we go for a run and tell me I have a problem? How about you go hang out with me at work and see me grind it out and see what I deal with and tell me I have a problem, or hang out with me and my kids after work, or watch me cook dinner for my family. Like I'm checking all the boxes. Like you can't tell me. No one could tell me I have a problem except for my wife. She could have told me I had a problem, and I think that she did in subtle ways, looking back. But also, like for her, it was like he's checking all the boxes. And but at the end of the day, stress um, anxiety from work started to set in. And I had been praying. I'd begun praying probably for over a year, honestly, for deliverance of some in some capacity. I remember just kind of asking God, like, Lord, I think you're going to have to shake me loose. I was like, but take it easy on me. Like, be gentle, take it easy. But I think I'm going to need your help. And sure enough, the stress, the anxiety, work, and combined with what had was turning into increased use to counter, to deal with the stress and the anxiety, self cope, and then also mixing um, cannabis with alcohol, started to mess with my head. I got a hold of a strand that, like, in hindsight, it's pretty easy to see what happened. I had been using a particular strand of cannabis that is specific for helping one reduce their anxiety and go to sleep. I got a hold of a hybrid, uh, and I intentionally did it, but I didn't realize, like, when you use this particular hybrid in a relaxed state, sure, it'll work like you're used to. When you use it in a state of high anxiety, it will increase your anxiety.
Oh wow.
And I literally, dang near Nebuchadnezzar style, lost my mind. I mean, I wasn't eating grass, but I did not want to be in my home. I couldn't be around crowds of people. I felt most comfortable and most normal in the woods. Um, and so I spent, about a week in the park. Fortunately, we live very close to a city park, one of the biggest parks in Little Rock. And then we're just a 20-minute drive to the woods where you can just about get all the way away from people and just spend time out in the woods. So I did that for about a week while I was drying out, but I was still trying to control it. I'd lost my ability to regulate my emotions. So I would, cry at the drop of a hat, and I couldn't, it was just nuts. It was really spooky how it all took place. My parents were set to come down and visit for the weekend, and I'm a very transparent person. I'm proud of myself and everything that I do, but my parents were some of the only people in the world that I had not told that I had gotten my medical license for cannabis use. And I didn't want them to know that, like, here I'm a 40-year-old man and I'm still hiding stuff from my parents. And but I've had this mental breakdown. I've shared this with my sister. Turns out, like, she was in secret, had gone through the same exact thing, using cannabis, using whiskey to cope. She was a month ahead of me in her sobriety, complete sobriety. And so she was able to kind of coach me through this. And I'm just like, oh, I've got to get my head back before my parents get here. I've got to hide this still. I don't want them to know I'm still, in shame. And my parents show up. I've gone to see a counselor, and I'm just sure of it. Like, I've another godly man, a counselor, and I leave there feeling like, oh my gosh, thank the Lord, thank God, I've got my wits about me. I can hold this together. I don't have to confess all of this to my parents while they're here. And they show up, and I hold it together through pizza. And then next thing you know, I realized I still was not right, and I'm losing it. And but at the end of the day, so I have to come out, like, I have to confess everything because I'm just such a nut job.
So wait,
And upstairs,
let me just kind of like see if I understand. So when you're saying like you got a bad strand, or you had a bad reaction to a strand of cannabis, you mean to say
mhm.
it like continued? It didn't like stop when you got went down after the use. It just, you kind of continued in
uh,
a state of
no,
anxiety
so
for.
it gets real scientific. I can't even get all into it, but the surface level is that there are basically two strands of cannabis. One's an upper and one's a downer. The upper is called sativa, and then the downer is called indica. And so I was an indica user because I wanted to use it at the end of the night. It helps reduce anxiety. It will help induce sleep. I'm not going to say that it gives you healthy sleep. That's the lie. Is that yeah, it'll
Right,
just put you
right.
to sleep, but it's not healthy sleep. But I didn't investigate it enough. That said, so I was using a hybrid, so it was kind of middle of the way. There was a little bit of a sativa strand in there, and the sativa, if you're in an anxious state, will increase your anxiety. And um, so since I'd gone on spring break and I had used this hybrid. And while I was on spring break, I'm in a relaxed state. If I didn't want to, drink one night, I could use it and, still fall asleep. It's no big deal. Well, we get back and my wife has to go out of town. She has to go to Atlanta. And so I'm at home with the kids alone. I definitely like did not want to have any drink. It's a work week. I don't want to have anything to drink. I had just done, I had done dry January, so like I was experienced at going without alcohol if I wanted to, but I'm back home. I've got both kids. I'm back at work from spring break, and I'm stressed about the week to come. It's a Sunday night, and so I don't drink. I use some cannabis, and next thing, but I can't fall asleep. I'm just like, oh dang, like I have to drink. I have to drink just to chill out. Like man, this stinks. The next night I do it again. Well, Alex is still out of town. Well, now I had to have twice as much. The first night I just have to have one whiskey. The second night I end up having to have two whiskeys. And Alex comes back and I shared with her. I was just like, yeah, the for whatever reason the cannabis did not work. It's something's wrong with it. And I went to the weed doctor and told him like, hey, this isn't working. And he re-prescribes me some different type of cannabis. And so I try it the next night, and now I've had to use three times as much whiskey because well I try and use like three times as much cannabis trying to blah 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 get to sleep, and it
Oh,
it
okay.
doesn't work. Next thing you know, like I'm like as high as a kite, do not want to be high, I want to be asleep, like I'm just miserable. I just felt like a crazy person, like as it was. And so I remember going back to the house, having three whiskeys to try and come down. I don't know, before I finally am able to fall asleep. My wife wakes me up at 6:15, 6:20, and I don't sleep till 6:15, 6:20. She's like, hey, are you okay? Are you all right? And I remember like pulling, the covers over my eyes and looking at her as like, I'm not right. I'm not right. Something's messed up in my head. I can feel it.
Wow.
And,
Wow. Okay.
and
Yeah,
I
I'm
was
starting to
still,
understand it better now.
yeah, I was still loose. I was still, you know, everything but did not want to be. And, so but it was from that moment, I never smoked cannabis again from that night. It was four more nights before Easter morning. It was four more nights that I tried to manage my drinking to slowly like quit cannabis and then control drinking to reduce my dependency on drinking. And so basically, it's where you attempt to only drink as much as you have to inhibit sleep, and then you never cross that line again. So the first night I was able to have just four glasses of wine, which I get just four glasses of wine is a lot, but for me that would not have been a lot. Like that's all it took, and I was thankful for it. And then the next night I was actually able to do two. I'm like, all right, right on, good. I'm making progress. And then the third night, uh, I had to have four again, and then the fourth night I had to have four again. And I call my sister, and I don't know what she said, but it's Easter morning, and I'm outside. I'm barefoot in my garden, my freshly tilled garden, just trying to, connect with the earth in a weird ritualistic way. And I had my back to the sun actually, and that voice popped up, and it's just like, "Are you done yet, Mike?" And I remember just start giggling and just laughing. It's just, I am done. I'm done. I don't care what it takes. I don't
Hmm.
care what it takes, but I'm done. I'm not drinking tonight. And I called my sister, and she, like I said, like I don't think she meant to convince me to quit that night, but whatever she said, I heard like I'm done. I'm quitting tonight. We're just doing it. And I was just like, hey, can you come down here? My parents were getting ready to leave, and she was like, yeah, I'll drive down right now. So she drove down and she stayed with me for the first four nights. We mostly stayed in the woods, ate a bunch of salads, a bunch of guacamole, just stayed super healthy. And I really, it was. what was spooky about it, I felt like the Lord just kind of making it easy where the Lord can just gave us the most perfect weather, which in Arkansas, we don't get that much perfect weather. But this entire week was perfect. And for somebody who did not want to be inside, had to be outside the whole time. And then for my sister to be able to make a window in her schedule to come down and spend time with me and just dry out. And it was, for me, it was just incredibly spooky, incredible, very much a spiritual thing. And yeah, so now,
So that was this year,
yeah, like I
right? That
said,
was this last Easter, correct? 2023.
yep, 130 plus days ago.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, I remember, and I don't remember when you posted it. It wasn't that long ago, maybe a couple months ago. You posted something, pretty open and transparent
Mm-hmm.
online, talking about what how your life had changed. And of
Yeah,
course, I didn't even know you were dealing with this. I mean, when we were together, I remember, I knew you drank, a little bit like beer sometimes at night or
sure.
whatever, but I never would have guessed in a million years, that you were dealing with any kind of and like you said, even according to your story, you kind of progressively got a little worse after your children were born. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a crazy thing about addiction is it can kind of sneak up on us sometimes. But yeah, I mean, we got a little bit left here. I just want to kind of hear the other side. I mean, because you were, and then the conversations that we've had, in between that, I mean, you've told me some amazing things about just how you've noticed a difference. So yeah, let's talk about the other side. What is it like to be
Yeah.
unchained from these addictions in your life?
Well, I had gotten down. I'd lost in the stress and anxiety and the unhealthy lifestyle. I had lost so much weight. I was down to like 3 pounds over my high school weight, and so since then I'm back up to a very healthy weight and a strong weight too. Like I'm much more like from a fitness standpoint. Like I mean, I'm 41, but I'm just feeling so good right now, so enabled at life. I would argue that for sure, like I was having cramps in my abdomen there for a while. They would just come up like, and you couldn't explain them. Sometimes in the middle of the night, and I almost never have those now, not near as often as I used to. Like 80% gone. And I would actually, would probably be 100% gone, but I did start mixing in some creatine into my diet, trying to build some muscle. And it's ever since I started the creatine, which does, you know, require more water, that I've had them come back. But also, restless leg syndrome. And this is just me. This is just anecdotal. I'm not a doctor, but I dealt with restless leg syndrome for years, and I used to like my cure for restless leg syndrome, if I ever had it, was like to go and have a shot of whiskey, and then it would go away. And that was really the hardest part of sobriety, was that first 30 days was just rebuilding my sleep architecture, and then getting through RLS, because the doctors are trying to prescribe me some pills, and nothing against the physicians. I'm not throwing shade here, but at the end of the day, I needed magnesium. They prescribed some stuff that really, it only made my RLS worse. Honest. And it turned out like just self educating myself. It came down to, I had stripped my body of magnesium, and that's what was causing for me personally, that's what was causing my RLS. The consistent use of alcohol every night was stripping my body of nutrition and nutrients, and I was magnesium deficient. And so anytime I didn't drink, it would not numb my legs and quiet them. And so the lack of magnesium would show up, and it would keep me up. It would keep me awake. So, but finally figuring this out, it may have taken 20 days, 25 days. I mean, I've tried everything, every single night, trying different things because everybody's telling you, like, as soon as you sober up, 7, 10 days in, the sleep just gets so much better. And I'm just praying. I'm like, Lord, you say in your word that you give sleep to those that you love. And I know that you love me, but I am not getting any sleep right now. Like, I'm begging you, give me some sleep. And at the end of the day, I mean, I've never heard the audible voice of God, but I just felt like the Spirit was telling me, like, yes, Mike, I love you. Sleep is coming, but there are consequences for your actions. And I just had to, again, I had to fill my body back up with the nutrition. I had to reestablish healthy sleeping patterns and rebuild that sleep architecture. So now, like, I'm overly obsessive. Like, I have to be in bed before 9 now, but I am sleeping like a teenager again. Um, like for sure 9 to 4, like almost solid. I'm 41, so I'll get up at least once to go to the bathroom. But my sleep is just amazing right now. Just waking up and feeling. I mean, all of us. I don't want to lie to you and say that like I wake up and I don't have any sleep eye to rub out of my eyes or anything like that. Like I'll wake up and it's a little bit of a struggle, but like 5-10 minutes later, without even my first sip of coffee, I am feeling alert. I'm feeling awake. I'm feeling focused. And so that has been amazing. That right there is almost like the carrot enough to uh, not consume another drink is just how sweet the sleep is. But there were I've had to, and I still do a little bit, but I've had like dry patches above my eyes and in my ears, and I'll have to use a hydrocortisone. Whereas when I was drinking, I used to have to do that like every 4 days or something like that. Now it's like every couple weeks, every month or something like that. I'd gone a couple months after sobriety actually the first time and not had to use that. So I don't know. It's just been interesting. Like it, alcohol was not the solution. I really did think that it was sort of the solution for my RLS for the nighttime cramps that was taking place. I never blamed alcohol for the dry skin, but and I definitely blamed alcohol for the bad sleep. But you get good sleep on the front end with alcohol, and then terrible sleep on the back end, and then you just grind it out the rest of the day. But it was like just literally the problem in so many different areas, and so it's just been interesting. The first 90 days of sobriety, and for some people it's longer, but for me it was about 90 days. You're really high on life. Like your body is leveling out. It's creating its own dopamine. I'm able to, I'm hitting those morning hikes more consistently. I'm getting those morning walks. Like every morning now I'm taking, morning walks or a morning hike or a morning run. I'm getting a bike tuned up right now because I want to start throwing that into the mix. And so it was an incredible period, that first 90 days, without a doubt, just high on life, lots of natural dopamine and just experiencing life sober for the first time, really, for me. That said, there's a thing called the pink cloud and that's that phase that you're in where you're just high on life. And when the pink cloud lifts, you start to kind of get bored with sobriety, and you start to, think back to, well, this isn't as good as I thought it was, and you start. That's when most people relapse, and I'm not saying I'm above it. I'm committed to 2 years. It is a very much one day at a time. But if it weren't for me making this 2 year commitment to God, I would have probably gone back to drinking sometime after the 90 days, just like everybody else who has experienced sobriety and then relapse. It's just part of it. But um, it doesn't go away. You say it. There's a period of time at the very least where you're wanting to go back. The dog wants to return to its vomit. And I was calling a friend on my way back from summer break just a month ago, maybe less. And I was asking him, he's been 4 years sober. I was just like, hey man, do you still want to drink every night? 4 years sober? Because I've started wanting to drink every night again. And like I'll be honest with you, man, I don't want to spend the next 4 years wanting to drink every night. Like I just don't think I can do it, and start future tripping essentially. And he's like, no, no, that does go away. I know which phase you're in. That does go away. But he's like, Mike, I'm going to tell you what your problem is. There is a parable that Jesus tells in the Bible of a woman who cleans her house and puts all the things in order and rids it of the spirit, of the evil spirit, but she doesn't fill it up with anything. And the spirit returns and brings 7 of its friends. And he says, Mike, you've made your house clean. You've put things in order, but you have not filled it back up. You haven't filled it with anything. And I didn't think, I say I didn't think that much about it. It obviously stood out to me. I meditated on that. And it wasn't until I got back. Travis, you know how many pages are in the Bible? Over 1,000, right? 1,400 something. There's hundreds and hundreds of pages in the Bible. Like my daily experience with the Bible is to read from the first chapter in this page until the next page ends. So I flip one page of the Bible every day in my morning reading. The next time that I read my Bible in my morning reading, that that exact parable is in my morning reading.
Oh, wow.
I mean, the Bible is pretty stinking thick. For it to be there, again, it could just be personal, but that's spooky. And it definitely is. It spoke to me, and I think like that's kind of the phase of sobriety that I'm in now. Is that I'm just thinking through like what were all the things like even before I was dependent on it, but all the things that I thought like, man, I could definitely do that if I didn't drink every weekend, and then if I didn't drink every night. You know what I mean? And so I'm just like I say, like here recently trying to raise my fitness even more. I've been trying to have something closer to like a fruitarian breakfast recently. I've cut caffeine out today. I reduced caffeine down to 1 cup for the last week. And then yesterday I went a half a cup and I was just like, this is taking too long. I'm done. And so this morning I got off of caffeine entirely. And I will admit there's a little bit higher level of irritability this morning. But I just want to see, what else there is out there that could potentially help me, raise my game. And I think that there's some low hanging fruit. I'm definitely not drinking caffeine for the rest of my life, so don't misunderstand me. But I think there might be some low hanging fruit with getting off of caffeine. Having a fast concerning caffeine for a little while, and so that's kind of where I am right now.
Man, that is awesome. We're gonna take a little break here with Mike. We've got a presentation from our main speaker, Richie Halverson. And when we come back from that, we're going to have a few extra questions from Mike. So just hold right on and we'll be back with him right after Pastor Richie shares with the message with us for tonight.
Welcome to Unchained, Hope and Healing from Addiction. If we want to experience freedom, we've got to break through the chains holding us back. We break through denial with honesty. We break through insanity with hope and open-mindedness. We've got to break through the paralyzation with faith and action. Break through fear with courage. Break through our ego and pride with humility and learning. We've got to break through the shame and guilt with forgiveness. Today, we're going to break through weakness with persistence and practice. In recovery, people often say, don't give up 5 minutes before the miracle. And when we're recovering, it's about progress, not perfection. Matthew 7:24-27 says, everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the wind blew and beat against the house, and it fell, and great was the fall. If we want to build a new, unchained life, we have to start putting things into practice. Progress, not perfection. James 1:22 says, when you only listen and you do nothing, you're only fooling yourself. Matthew 7:24, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice. Living an unchained life takes practice. The reason many of us don't see the changes in our life, the changes in our marriage, the changes in our family that we would like to see is we're not putting things that we learn into practice. Rene Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. But it takes more than just thinking. It takes doing. We can know something mentally, and that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to live that out in our life in reality. We do not become what we repeatedly hear. We become what we repeatedly do. Recovery works when we work it. 1 Corinthians 9:24 through 27, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Run like you want to recover. We've got to run like we want our marriage to improve. We've got to run like we actually want to be unchained. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and I make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Paul is saying we've got to practice what we preach. An unchanged life does not happen by accident. An athlete doesn't become an all-star by sitting in a classroom. No, by putting it into practice. It takes hard work. The word athlete, you know what it means? It means to struggle. It's a struggle to live a new life. It's a struggle to break old habits. It's a struggle to do what you should do when it's not what you want to do. It's a struggle to forgive people sometimes. But every time we put these breakthroughs into practice instead of old behaviors, we grow stronger, happier, healthier, and more free. But it's going to take practice. It's progress, not perfection. Think of how much time you have put into practicing your addiction. Think of how much time we've put into practicing our habit, or maybe our hang-up or our heartache. Think of the amount of time that we have put into living our old life. I mean, some of us have practiced our whole life being negative. That's not going to change overnight. Some of us have practiced our whole life getting angry at the drop of a hat. That's not going to change overnight. You can't give up after the first time you mess up. You've got to keep getting up. Persistence, perseverance, practice. You know, practice requires patience. My sponsor used to always say, be careful what you pray for. Whenever I pray for patience, God sends a traffic jam. You know, we've got to learn to practice these principles in all our affairs. If we don't use them, we lose them. Practice takes patience. We didn't become addicted overnight. We didn't become angry overnight. We didn't become controlling overnight. Recovery is not a one-time event. Living an unchained life isn't a one-time thing. It's a daily recommitment. Every day we decide to live a life happy, joyous, and free. In 1 Timothy 4:7-8 in the Message, it says, exercise daily in God. No spiritual flabbiness, please. Workouts in the gymnasium are useful, but a disciplined life in God is far more, making you fit both today and forever. And this is the thing, if you're going to start practicing, you've got to start practicing before the crisis comes. If you wait until you need something before putting into practice, you're not going to be able to do it. You're going to be in trouble. If you wait until the storm comes before building a good foundation, it'll never be able to stand. Why does it seem we always have to wait until our life falls apart before we're willing to do something about it? I always had to do things the hard way. But before I treasured the things that really mattered, I had to lose everything else. Why do we always have to wait until our life is falling apart before we're willing to do what we should have been doing all along? This character, Jonah in the Bible, has to get swallowed by a whale before he's willing to start listening. Samson, he waits until he's bald and blind. Peter waits until he's denied and deserted. And that's why we've got to start practicing right now. We can't wait until we need it before we start practicing it. We got to practice it now. Don't wait until you have a heart attack before you start doing something about the way you're living. Don't wait until you're researching divorce attorneys before you start researching marriage counselors. Don't wait until you get the diagnosis with lung cancer before you say, you know what, I need to start trying to quit smoking. Start practicing right now. Man, of all the things God unchained me from, smoking was one of the hardest. I mean, every addiction is hard. Every bad behavior is hard. Every habit is hard. But man, smoking was one of the hardest because you see, I had put a lot of practice into smoking. When I got up in the morning, it was the first thing that I did. Before I went to bed, it was the last thing that I did. I smoked after every meal. I mean, it integrates and infiltrates our lives. I practiced smoking a lot. Well, I'm going to have to put some practice into quitting smoking a lot as well. It's simple, but it's not always easy. We've got to put things into practice before the crisis comes. In Matthew 7:25, it said it rained hard, the floods came and the winds blew and hit that house, but it did not fall because it was built. Notice it's past tense. The wise man built his house before the storm came. You got to build a foundation of an unchained life before the problems come, before the crisis and the storm comes, because it's coming. It's easy to not use dope when life is going good. It's easy to be nice when you like someone. It's easy to be faithful in a relationship when you're getting along. If you wait until the storm comes before you start working and practicing, it's going to be too late. Begin building an unchained life right now. These principles have to go from our heads to our heart. We've got to go to the core of the problem. A good life requires a good foundation. We have to dig down deep. Any good structure has a good foundation where they dug down deep. The part of the house that matters most is the part you can't see. The surface is never as important as the foundation, which is interesting to me because it seems like the surface is the only thing we really care about. We tend to focus on the surface, but God, He focuses on what's below. In Matthew 23:25, it says, you clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they're full of greed and self-indulgence. You see, God always goes below. 1 Samuel 16:7, for the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Now, I'm not saying the surface isn't significant. I'm just saying it doesn't matter as much as we make it. It's much better to have a good foundation. What matters most in any structure, including life, is what's below the surface. What's going on where people can't see. What's going on in your foundation. Luke 6:46-48, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I tell you? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, I'll show you what he's like. He's like a man building a house who dug deep. The wise builder didn't stop digging until he hit something strong enough to build his life on. There's only one person strong enough to sustain you. There's only one person stable enough to sustain your marriage. There's only one person righteous enough. Don't stop digging until you hit the bottom. Dig past the dysfunction. Dig past the depression. Dig past the present dilemma. Don't let these things hold you back. Keep digging past the problems, past the pain, all the way until you hit something hard that can hold you up. Man, in early recovery, I had messed up so many times. I had relapsed so many times, been to treatment in and out of jails, that when I was finally made it to recovery, I was afraid that I was going to relapse again. And you always hear that famous, we've talked about it in this series, hitting bottom. And I had heard that so many times growing up. And so I went up to my sponsor and I asked him, because I was afraid I was going to relapse and go back out there. And I said, how do I know when I hit my bottom? And I'll never forget what he told me. He said, Richie, your bottom happens when you put down the shovel. When I finally hit something solid enough to build my life on, I stopped digging. God was the rock at the bottom of my barrel. What are you building your life on? If it's a career, you can lose it. If it's a relationship, you can lose it. If it's your money, you can lose it. If it's your youth, I hate to break it to you, you're going to lose it. We've got to build our lives on something we can't lose. To live an unchained life, we've got to build our life on something bigger and stronger and firmer. which is why I've discovered that sometimes God allows the crisis to come. Sometimes God's got to allow the storm to come in order to show you what you've built your life on. In Hebrews 12:27, it says, all of creation will be shaken and removed so that only unshakable things will remain. God loves you too much not to shake you. He's got to shake all the fake friends out of your life. He's got to shake all the dysfunctional thinking out of your life. He's got to keep on shaking so that when all is said and done, the only thing we depend on is something that we can never lose. Ecclesiastes 3:1, it says, for everything there is a season, a time to break down and a time to build up. There are some things in your life. There are some people in your life. There are some ways of doing things, some stinking thinking that you need to let God dig out from the root. Let Jesus dig down to the root and dig it out. You see, before there can be transformation, there must first be excavation. God always breaks us down before He builds. He loves us too much to let us build our life on something that cannot sustain our life. And this goes for everybody. All of us try to build our lives on something other than God, and it will always fall short. But if you build your life on God, you can have the confidence that He can hold you up. You can have the confidence that if God's breaking it up, it's only so He can give you something better. And so here in this parable that Jesus tells, we've got two builders. They go through the same storm and they're working on the same project and both have access to the same tools. From the outside, they look exactly the same, but one is a fool and one is wise. The way they respond to the storm is totally different. The fool falls apart, but the wise builder stands firm. Because the wise man built his life upon the rock. A rock is something solid. A rock doesn't change. It's concrete. It's in stone. Everything else changes. But God, the solid rock, doesn't change. In Matthew 16:18, it says, upon this rock I will build my church, and the powers of hell can't even conquer it. When the wise man saw the storm coming, he doesn't panic. What does he do? He praises God in the storm. Let me tell you, if God is your foundation, you'll be able to praise God in the storm too. Your life won't fall apart the second something goes wrong. Yeah, the enemy, your addiction, may try to knock your house down. But if you built your house on God, He will not prevail. Matthew 16:18, the gates of hell shall not prevail against your house. You see, Jesus dug His way down from heaven, all the way to Calvary. And He went all the way to the root of our problem, which is our brokenness. It's that hunger inside of us that keeps looking for satisfaction and love in all the wrong places. He went all the way to the root of our problem in order to give you something that you can build your life on today, right now. It's all about progress, not perfection. Jesus is the only perfect person who's ever lived. Trust in Him. You don't have to do everything perfectly because He did everything perfectly. Trust in Him. Build your life on Him and start living an unchained life today.
Thank you, Pastor Richie, for another powerful presentation on hope and healing from addiction. Tonight, we were really focusing on putting into practice the things that we have learned through this seminar. Stop digging. I love that. You know, we need to build on the rock of Jesus Christ. We need to begin to put into practice the things that we've learned. And I appreciate what we already got from Mike and his testimony and some of those very things he shared with us. But let's get into a little Q&A with Mike at this time. Mike, just can you share a little bit about just your relationships, you know, your most important relationships, your relationships with your wife, your relationships with your kids, You kind of mentioned your relationship with God a little bit, but just how have all those things been enhanced, and even, gotten better over these last 120
Mm-hmm.
days?
So we generally think that, I mean, it's just marketed to us as Americans, and I mean, in many other cultures, that wine, beer, alcohol in general is, makes us a better parent in some capacity. It helps us. It just kind of numbs things. It allows us to deal with toddlers in some capacity. I think you might see it in pop culture called mommy juice or something, red wine called mommy juice or something like that. And I mean, without a doubt, man, there were so many times like, oh, I just could not have a glass of wine fast enough when the kids are just going nuts. But what alcohol actually does is, yeah, sure, you're going to get an initial, dopamine, initial increase in dopamine, and that's going to make it a little bit easier for you to get through, a certain period of time. But then you're going to be operating at a dopamine deficit, and it can help you deal with some anxiety and stress, and it can turn your mind off so that you can go to sleep. But the consequences the next day, even if you're able to avoid a bad hangover, your chemicals are not operating, functioning like they can at the in your brain when you're in sobriety. So you're just operating at a deficit, and you're actually experiencing a higher level of anxiety. It actually increases your stress during the day, which like it. So now you need it that much more, when you get home from work, because you're experiencing more anxiety and more stress than you should naturally. And I know for sure in sobriety, like it's crazy to me, both in dealing with the children, how like they can just be, having one of their tantrums, and like knowing what my level of patience was, pre-sobriety, and knowing what it is now, I'm just like, it's crazy that my level of patience, for me personally, it's just endless. Like, oh yeah, you're having a meltdown now. Like, I don't lose it. I just don't snap like I was with them. And so I've just so appreciated that I don't do the things that give you the daddy guilt later. They're like, oh man, I overreacted. I should not have done that. I'm not saying they don't ever happen. Yeah, I mean, I still uh, react sometimes and have some daddy shame, but it does not happen near as often. I'm much more proud of myself as a father. Uh, when the first 30 days were really tough in sobriety, probably 45 days. My wife and I are very close. We check in. We do a lot of things right. Um, but post sobriety, like there were a lot of things that I was suppressing, a lot of things that we were not dealing with. And so I get sober, and all of a sudden, uh, like I can't just drink the problem away. I'm actually having to address and deal with the problem. And so we went and saw our marriage counselor, which we've had a good relationship with a marriage counselor since before we even got married. He did our premarital counseling, and we saw him more. We've seen him more post sobriety than we ever did pre sobriety, and all for good reasons. Now, honestly, I don't want to paint this picture that it's it's good and it's good forever and ever and ever now, but it is so much better. I promise you that our relationship is just so much better post sobriety. But I will admit the first 30, 40 days were really tough. We had more fights in that 30, 40 days than we did the 2 years before me getting sober. But we just kind of had to deal with some stuff and get through some stuff. And I mean, I think for the first time, for me personally, I just started really trying to understand her perspective more, and not because people weren't probably telling me that I should, for years before that, but I just for whatever reason didn't take the time. But in my sobriety, definitely, and I've just been very. So her big thing is, and it's so simple. It's like, hey, can you every once in a while schedule a date night? It's so simple. It's not hard to do. And I made some attempts to schedule some date nights pre-sobriety, but they wouldn't work out or whatever, but not that much. But now that I'm sober, it's like it is so much easier for me to remember, like, oh yeah, just schedule a date night. That's all she wants. You know what I mean? And so and that just helps our relationship. So I've just been so pleased, so thankful for the positive impact that sobriety has had on my relationship with my kids, my wife. Um, Not to say that mistakes aren't made and things don't go wrong, but I feel way better personally about how I respond to things more often than I did pre sobriety.
Yeah, one more question, man, because we're running out of time here. But can you talk to that person right now, or just talk to somebody that, I mean, you're pretty fresh into sobriety, but it took you a while to get to that point where you even were open to quitting. Maybe there's somebody watching that's at that point. They haven't quite made that step to stop, but they're at the point where they're willing to consider it for the first time, or
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
they're at they're kind of on the
Sober
edge, teetering.
curious. Yeah.
And so speak to that person, and then also, in doing so, can you share a little bit about what you share with me about just kind of those morning walks with God that you've been having recently, and then just kind of yeah, does that kind of close out our interview with
Mm-hmm.
those thoughts?
Mm-hmm. For the person who's going through it, I'm sure that they are like me in that, like, you're the only one who knows that you're just about ready, that you just about had it. And this is the human experience, generally speaking, for adults who want to live a healthy life, who want to live a long life. They eventually have this period, and they recognize it, that something needs to change, and the spirit is speaking to them, and they know it. And I mean, that's all I can really say. But what's cool about, like, this, to get sober in this day and age, is all the science behind the benefits of sobriety, and all the tools that there are in getting sober. Like, it is the podcasts that are out there. The Stop Drinking Coach, man, he's so good. The But yeah, I mean, this sober curious movement, I think it's actually kind of moving more heavily in Gen Z than in the millennials and Gen X and whatever. I think they just saw the generations ahead of them, and it's just like, man, you guys are just a bunch of lushes. I think I want to experience life sober, and let me try something different and experience life sober. So it's almost, I feel like there's almost this "it's cool to be sober" movement. Um, Remember, and Instagram, I don't even follow this, but I've just heard about, they have this sober AF, hashtag or whatever, where it just becomes this new movement and celebration. And so, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I'm so thankful for it. The first thing I do every morning after my quiet time is I kneel and pray, and I raise my hand to God, and I thank Him for two things: delivering me and from alcohol and cannabis, and for sleep. And I really am. I'm just so thankful for deliverance, for sleep. After that, yeah, I go for these morning walks. I have just been really interested in mindfulness lately, and just listening to birds, like a crazy person should be interested in listening to birds, but birds and insects. And so I try to go for a 30-minute walk or a run or a hike, and I don't listen to a podcast. I don't listen to a book. I turn my phone off. I don't look at my phone, but, like, literally just try and practice being present in in what the creation that God has created for us. I built a prayer garden in my backyard, put a water feature out there, and have all these plants growing around it, and these two swings that swing toward each other. I did that just in my sobriety, but just trying to really just enjoy what the Lord has created and being mindful of that. And it's kind of the, I don't know, it's what I get high on now is just experiencing the Lord's creation in sobriety and early in the morning when it's still nice out and no one else is there, because I still do love my solitude. And yeah, just so thankful for it. It is, and the crazy things that just happen sometimes when you just feel like we've all had it, like you're just thinking and you're giving your mind that space for your imagination to take root, to do something special, and the words just start falling out of your, they just, everything just starts coming together. It's really, it's amazing. But you have to give the Lord, the Spirit, the Creator, the space to work in your life. And with two kids and a full-time job and everything, that's hard to do.
Thank you, Mike. We had a little technical difficulty there at the end where he got cut off there, but I think we got the important parts of his answer there at the end. And man, Mike, we appreciate you sharing with us your story. I know it touched my heart, and I know it touched many of us as well here who were able to listen and kind of walk that path that you walked. And wherever you are in your life, we want you to know that we are here for you. Fort Myers Seventh-day Adventist Church is a church that is a place for anyone who is struggling in their life to come and find hope and healing. We're not a club for the saints. We're a hospital for sinners. And I hope that you would check us out if you're in the Fort Myers area. We have services here every Saturday at 11 o'clock, and we would love to meet you. So come visit us and enter into a journey of hope and healing with us here, right here in Fort Myers. All right, well, we're going to now do our nightly drawing. And like I said, anyone who registered is potentially going to be a winner tonight. So let's see who tonight's winner is. Tonight's winner for the book The Darkness Shall Not Overcome is Andrew Frazier. Congratulations, Andrew. We're going to get you a signed copy of Richie's book. And if you didn't win tonight, I just want to encourage you. You can go on Amazon.com and type in The Darkness Shall Not Overcome or Richie Halverson, and you can get a copy of your own book. I know it's a great book you can share with your friends and family. Anybody that you know that is struggling with addiction, Richie's book is just as powerful as his presentations have been, and I know you will be blessed. So again, thanks for coming tonight. Thanks for hanging out with us. We have 2 more nights to go, Friday night and Saturday, so I hope you will come back and join us tomorrow night at 7:30. And until then, God bless.